Inside Story Uganda, real source of political updates. Inside Story Uganda.
Kugamba amabye nnyo amawulire agatali malungi ag'okufa kwa Ssaabasumba w'essaza ly'e Kampala Dr. Spiano Kizito Lwanga yatuva ku maaso ku lunaku lwali lwa mukaaga. Era olunaku olwaleero ndina omwami Tamale Mirundi kyemmanyi nti omusajja aviira ddala mu ddiini eyo yennyini era ssebo tukwaniriza olunaku olwaleero.
Anti nze nsoma hybrid.
Asoma hybrid.
Ennaku ze tetukyalina system eri awo nti oba capitalism oba marxism oba communism, you borrow here and there. Kakati bw'otunulyanga wano where you have an executive president ate prime minister abeerera waati. But prime means chief, prefect, head of ministers in this sense. Nze nsoma hybrid naye njagala kwebaza abakulembeze b'ekereziya the way they have handled the matter so far. Media ya Uganda teri mature. I have no respect for Ugandan media.
All right, Tamale.
No, they don't know when morning system, they don't know when Wazanya Katemba. What killed the who? Are you a doctor? Are you a medical doctor? Speculation. Media ya one is speculating. The way they write, to see expert in knowledge. No.
Tugenda tukawa Mr. Tamale.
In my opinion, how many times do you go to a medical doctor? How many? Kakati kusanga Magufuli yatwapasinga Tanzania. Tanzania nene nnyo eri mu Uganda mmeka. Just to talk throughout to Tanzania. Ate bumba mu Kalulu Kikwete collapsed during the campaign. They are addressing huge countries, very big countries. Africans, we only go to a hospital when we are in trouble. Nze najjanga ku radio oba ku TV nenkolola. Until my children who are doctors told me ti empewo eyo esi yakuyingira mu mawuggwe yambalya mwaka kooti munda. So lack of scientific explanation kati bw'otuulya Papa era yafa bw'atyo. Nakugamba nti ebitabo bibiri in God's name ne faaza yamwanukula nti ekyo ekitabo kya devil. But when you read the two books n'oli naye yayina points e Bukalanga waliwo eyaliyo naye bamusanga mu nnyumba preaching. Those preachers abo abazungu abo bemulaba abalokola abapuliiki.
Tamale nga tetunnabatuuka wala amawulire gakusanze wakifunye otya gwe nga gwe
omusajja kitange yafa nafiirwako abaana babiri omulundi gumu. I'm prepared for death. Ndyewunye n'okufa. Yes, as human beings we are shocked, but kakati tunuulira enfa yeri nakyo naye ate bano abaana be bakuulamu ebintu ate ne babookya peyini eyo yennuma ku mwana wange nkuttirawo. I kill you kubanga why do you punish him? Then natural death. Natural death, the Catholic Church has handled the matter well. Si yasoose okufa mu shocking gundi ate era ngenda nentunuulya Catholic Church ne Anglican Church. Anglican Church babeera n'abakyala baabwe n'abaana. But to sleep alone in a room. Yes, but you look some. If there was somebody else, what kind of speculation is that one? Boganti aina, over blast, over father, go sharing in a room. It is a home. So how many times do you go for medical check-up? President Yabagamba, Yayoga and Nagandi. How many Ugandans go for deworming? How many? Abaganti, I have to deworm myself. But on who have personal doctors? Your doctor is there to check you in the morning, in the wound. You must have this diet. So, I'm happy. It is so far monitor yabirese everyday bitandise because they are not mature. Ready paper, I have not read it. Just to always here speculating of speculating.
Mr. Tamale, kati abakristo bagenda musubwako ki kiriza nti bazza abantu bamwogerako ebintu abadde bwati
fe batugayidinga tibyogerera ku lumbe sibyogerera ku mbaga nzaino akibiso kulwanga yali ne faza mulumba nga beba business managers bakalina nsoboka era bw'omutunuulira tabadde nnyo holistic abadde nnyo mu business tiasooka nogamba pulezidenti balooya banzibi omwana tasobola kyogera omwana is holistic kati ate bo bano waliwo generation empya ey'abafaza abagaa nti we must invest nabagaa nti viagula yakolebwa Anglican Church viagula because the investors at the Anglican Church ye Bungereza the head of the Anglican Church bali bagenda kubamba center. This is a no executive. The church must make money. Akati rwanga abadde nnyo development ngansuubuga kanali wamalaye holistic ziwa is holistic boba bolizi banjiri baloyo byamwewo tebakombayininga byonna. Yes. Two, tibabadde bambi nabo babeera ne pressure, especially abantu babatuukira yogerayo kano yogerayo kino times nibokola controversial statements kubanga abantu babataddeko pressure. That's why nze njagala eddakiika nawandika akatabo kange kano which I think is relevant now. What separates religion and the state? When should religious leaders, what do we expect from religious leaders?
Bagamba badde muntu alivoko ayogera ku bigenda maaso ebyo government byekola
nze
waliwo ekisuka ku ekyo kye basobola okukola mu
Yes, I wrote and there's nothing I've not written about. It is dated April 2012.
Yes, sir.
How many years now? Nabagamba nti where religious leaders lead change, when should they intervene in the politics? A religious leader to intervene in the politics. I say, Cardinal Sin was the son of immigrant parents who settled in the Philippines in the 40s. In spite of his foreign ancestry, however, Sin joined the seminary and later was ordained cardinal. By the time Sin became cardinal and Archbishop of Manila, Philippines was under dictator Ferdinand Marcos. This was a time when the Cold War was coming to an end and the importance of dictators like Mobutu and Marcos to America was declining. The United States had established military bases in the Philippines. The Philippines were opposed to turning their country into a garrison. However, the American strategists wanted to maintain Marcos in power in spite of his questionable democratic credentials. With the democratic wave of the early 80s, Marcos became a victim. He lost the massive finance support from the USA government. The opposition under Aquino was weak and fragmented. Aquino was forced into exile in the USA. However, all of the opposition groups got united under Cardinal Sin, determined to overthrow Marcos. Marcos was forced to make reforms and to allow Aquino return to the Philippines. He was assassinated at Manila International Airport. The assassination sparked off a massive mass reaction similar to the recent Arab revolutions witnessed recently. Marcos was besieged in the State House and soldiers joined the masses. His Air Force pilots bombed his State House compound. He was saved by American Marines who whisked him from Manila to USA. The popularity of Cardinal Sin soured. However, when the Philippines decided to vote General Ramos, a former army commander under Marcos, Cardinal Sin wanted to dictate to them to vote. They rejected and opposed him. He united the opposition against Marcos. When Marcos left and he went on to dictate to the Filipinos said no. So for General Ramos, they also rejected another directive not to elect a gambler, Joseph Sweda. Era yakomawo nabagano ari kugambye my opportunity now. Every morning is ogera bijirimu. Morning, this is death united all of us. But this is my opportunity to tell the religious leaders where when they should come in and where they are missing. Like in the Philippines example above, the people refused to accept the betrayal, and as a result, the church in Latin America, yes, church but Twitter, just priests. There was an argument in Latin America that if Latin America dictators were removed through revolutions, that the communists would take over and the Bakole. So some priests said no. Should we maintain the dictators because we fear communists? We shall fight communists. If they come, the Jewish president on Papa mu Yesu. On Papa aliko mu Yesu. Bundi waliwo mulala bamwita listed mu Yesu. They oppose. Said your argument is stupid that we should maintain the dictators because if we remove the dictators, the communists and the Balokole will take over Latin America. Nkugamba. In Kenya, the religious leaders were directly involved in forcing the Moi regime out of power. However, when Moi left, a fierce battle between the new government and the religious leaders ensued. While the religious leaders were trying to dictate on the new leaders, they had pushed into power. Kanali Bakawuma, Bamurumba, Bansubuga, Barwani Sobot, Banubagazako MUSEVENI ABALEMA. But in this situation, yali indala.
Baba ina kurwanisa government oba kulaba nti gwanga
anti situation yojibala nenkogamba in South Africa. Bishop Desmond Tutu tried to dictate to the new leaders of South Africa, but a serious battle erupted between Tutu and the ANC leaders. Nobody questioned the contribution of Tutu to the liberation of South Africa from the jaws of apartheid. But the problem was to extend his role, to impose his wishes on the new leaders. Tutu bamuvuma mbeki yagamba Tutu nti gwe Tutu wadayininganga na apartheid zotugamba ko lwavumirira corruption yali mu South Africa naye nga ati yabaleta. He failed to know when to go. When the religious leaders, when the chairman of the wedding committee comes, bwadda ku Monday bamugamba yagala kwana mugole ngatava wa munne yowalolo is over. Kakati nkugamba limits of religious leaders. There has always been a conflict between religious leaders and politicians and state organs. In my opinion, religious leaders can only involve themselves in politics when politicians fail to play their role properly. Politics like boxing, the coach throws in the towel to save a player who is no longer able to make rational judgments. Religious leaders can come in case of a political statement, but when they do, they must follow the principles of politics. Toyinza kubabuulira noga nti kakati okulonda kweyongereyo under which constitution? Kweyongerayo kutya? Which constitution provision?
Okize mu context eyaffe wano wakati balemeredde okukola.
Yanti nkubuulira.
Kiki basobola okukola?
When do they come in? Initially come in when there is a statement, it will be read. Cardinal Subuga asked the Pope to allow him to mediate between Museveni and Okero. After 2 weeks, he came back and said, these people are not serious. When they agree on this, tomorrow they change. Not the work. When you come in, the church should come in where the government undermines its interests, not support the opposition. Once the government encroaches on religious freedom, come and fight. When you see the monks on the street, the government has fallen. Why? Monks demand one thing, to stay in their monasteries and pray.
ekyaffe kiri kitya Tamale kuba tulaba boogera buli lunaku tebasobola kugenda
for example ani nkugambye nti situation
kuwamba abantu okugenda mu maaso.
The church should come in where the government undermines its interest not to support the opposition. For example, if the government is biased against any faith, like the Armenian regime, where convert sessions were against non-Muslims, where some religious sects were banned, or in Burundi, where seminaries were abolished and prayer hours restricted, the church must come in. Tolumba atayina kyakoze ekyo olubula Museveni abalemeddewo.
Talina kyabakoze.
Akoze eki. Aweze seminar.
Boogera ku bigenda mu maaso.
Yes, you encourage the kakati abaana babatta. This is side. Strengthen the side. Sikuvuma Museveni. Strengthen the side, the criminal department of government.
Nena anti kati Tamale ne president avayo na abyogerako naye tebikoma.
In such cases where the government threatens religious interests, in such cases the church is free to fight back. The church can also fight a government that neglects its responsibilities, like ensuring peace, controlling the army and the parliament, undermining state institutions. Then the church comes in, but in a constructive manner.
Tamale waneno tetulabanga abantu babawamba enchane.
The way you that's why the Catholic Church, they use pastorators. They sit as a church and they point out the areas. Kakati ababana bana babase olaba yochi mawulire mwekiri bakuba yochi mu baba wasente because these are commercial killers. These are Israelis who are using post houses in to kill people for export. I told you a day after tomorrow on Thursday 32 people are going to appear before the International Criminal Court. Do you see the story in the newspapers? Walabye ko munadini yakyogerako
waliwo ekiri extreme Mr. Tamale
abantu basatu mu babiri
November nga 18 abantu abasukka mu ataano
ne rumwe maze okubeera assembly for killing Ugandans and exporting their organs. Do you see any someone, any religious leader talking about this? Ambulira balumba Museveni nkugamba. Therefore religious leaders can venture into politics only when the following situation prevails. Only when the following situation prevails. One, where a bad government threatens the survival of the church or religious interests. In China, the Catholic Church is controlled by the state, and it is the state that appoints bishops and cardinals without the consent of the Vatican. Also in the countries like the former communist countries where seminaries had been locked and closed, as well as limiting the prayer hours. Abakomunist era obukatuliki bulwanyisa nnyo abakomunist. Nali nkola mu lupapula lwa munno kakati nga bateeka nga aba North Korea bateeka mu advert to celebrate Kemweru Sang oli omukadde. The Pope's envoy called the editors of Munno, why do you put communism here? Never forget to innocent. Close the newspaper. The cardinal enemy of the Catholic Church is communism. Netufuna Osborne na Jawan. Osborne yali mulokole. Nalanga ebirango biyitirivu. Bateekamu ekirango ky'Osborne. Ombaka wa Papa yabayita. We are not sister churches. We are not related at all to balokole. The closest church to the Catholic Church, the Orthodox, mukijimu ebirango twabijjamu ne baleeta condom. The position of the church yali total opposite. Tetwalanga kirango kya condom mu munno olupapula ne luwa kakati awo olwana nega number 2 where religious leaders are targeted and killed. If the situation is allowed to continue and consolidate itself, this will eventually result into the dysfunction of the church. Therefore, under such a situation where government is targeting religious leaders, the religious leaders must fight back and remove that government. egadde seminari yo ebattira ku bituuti ekola mujambale kubanga if you don't do it you die.
Tamale webanga ebintu ebikolebwa ku bantu bwe basumba endiga zaabwe.
Yes.
Kati bavira
identify what the problem I'm telling you. The problem in Uganda is misuse of institutions. It's not the president. The president has created the institutions. Misuse I was
if
the president was going to work alone, nobody talks about the side director. No. A religious leader must be knowledgeable. He has a PhD, he is a doctor. You must know how the state functions and which area is lacks needs to change. Where the government fails to protect its citizens, this means that the state has abdicated its responsibilities and is no longer state. So organized groups like the church can come in to guide the society.
Tamale, how do you account ku bantu abafa omwaka oguwedde November 18 ennaku abali abayitirivu ennaku 2 ekyo tekireetera bannaddiini kuvaayo tekimala.
You cannot expect a government to follow its hands if it is threatened by survival. A government is a human being. Survival.
Ne president yakkaanya nakyo.
Ate kubuulidde nabagamba kyekyakubya n'omwana wange ti president bamuleeta message enfu. Aba military intelligence n'abayiso bakolera ku message eriyo plan biteriyo. Would we expect Museveni to wait to burn the city? Yabagamba ko nti mbakulemu enjala mubatte mubabuze. Kakati you must direct. Who is responsible? What's the responsible institution in the government? But you don't concentrate on Museveni, a leader. No, is it state katimba nkubi abasajja bano nemba tuso kubatembesa ennyonyi. Why? I'm heavily protected. I'm protected by the president. I'm one of the people who are heavily protected. Wensula waliwo abaserikale 10. Military police etantambula nayo. My vehicle is monitored by satellite. Ataka myandisi yabagamba ataka
ebitongole bino ebate bisobola kukola
anti-direct your attention. Bwe balonda director wa side ayisibwa mu parliament. Aba yaguzedda.
Parliament nanti abasinga
mbaera attribute muve kuono your mistake is to direct the attack on one individual instead of abana bange ngambalekera wo sente nyabwe nazinywa mu omwenge. If they are mature, do they blame me? That leaves the money here. Nakugamba nti nebimu kubyeboogera tibiriyo. Religious leaders must not be part of the government. They should support the policies which are poor people. Secondly, nobody should be above criticism. Anybody who claims that what he says cannot be discussed is dangerous to free thinking and democratic governance. In feudalistic societies, elders, chiefs, kings cannot be challenged. But the democratic societies, leaders are scrutinized by the people they lead. This is a democratic gund. Kakati nenkugamba nti nabo bayina okumanya obwogamba nti Museveni aveeko, but there is an election.
Ni election eri district bagamba okutandikira ddala mu
nabeewabwe ne mu ddiini mwebiri bankubuulire. Bishop Herimani Kabale abakatoliki bamukubeera ku alutaali. Did Museveni intervene? Oba papa yaweereza omuzungu. Currently the Catholic Church is divided into 4 archdioceses ono we Kampala. Tetukyayina archbishop atwala ggwanga. Kati the head of the Catholic Church is the chairman of the did Museveni ask the Pope, why are you dividing my country into 4 archdioceses?
Ekimu kiraga nti kifeeringa lwaki bateekawo obukiiko ng'akettaka ate nga balina ministry
nambeera kakati akettaka all of the churches abazungu bribed the churches nabo balandilodi bagoba abantu. That's why land cannot be
abatuufu kugenda direct ew'omukulembeze.
Atatia, you don't attack this man. You are knowledgeable, you are educated. What are the areas? That's what I do. Nti ono director wa side singa yaliza yininga da. In internal affairs get a tough man like a subject omuteekeyo.
Naye Tanzania tula mukulembeze yabo baba.
Museveni cannot be like Gundi Magufuli.
N'omukyala.
Nojja n'ogoba n'okola ki ebyo byonna byakatemba. Institution, what if he dies like a Mafuguli? Make the institutions function.
N'ekiganye
Anti kiganye sibye mukola. Sibye mukola. You direct the attack on one individual. It's not if the one priest bwazala abaana. Do we attack the Pope? Abakatuliki bebasooka omukuba faze yawasizza. Before the Pope intervenes, bamugoba. Wano abasoga bakuba bamuoza emiggo mu church. Did Museveni intervene? He left the church to solve these issues. Wano badira Gundi omulabirizi egundi ne bamuteekako empiso ne bamutuusa ku Sebuhinje yatuula ku mpiso. Did the government intervene or it allowed them to solve their problem according to church rules? So when you want to criticize government, look at the principles. Nenkugamba wano nti ebintu ebimu bye boogera bannaddiini tebiriiyo.
Kati basinzira ku ky'okubyogera.
Anti babeera under pressure.
Pressure okuva eri.
Kakati gwe boogamba nti kuba ebintu byabwe babyettira methodology. If we want to elect a speaker, tumuleetera mutwe gwa mwana, tova nankabirwa bbeya nnako tokola ki. Then ekintu ekyonoonye because they are politically amateurs. If you want to attack Mirundi will attack you. Sirabutu paka lumuyingiza kabuli. Sinza kukkiriza kunjogoddemu onjooge. Look at the system, tukiyita systems analysis. Which drives the system? Kakati kakankubuuza. Papa ali Roma. Baali batwala Berlusconi, Prime Minister wa Italy. Nti ayagala obwana obuto. Did you see the Pope making any noise? He's not a citizen. Osanga Kalino Wamala ng'agenze n'ayingira mu Nkerevu okulonda Papa. Nga Bishop omu Italy talonze.
Naye otunyonyodde nti embeera bweba extreme. Ate oba olina okubuuka ku madaala.
Anti tebiriiwo. These are weaknesses of government that are persisting because you directed the attacker to a wrong address.
Ate osanga era babitwala eri ewakyama.
N'ogamba nti kakati kankubuuza tugenda obusofa tukiyiseeko. Kakati nkugamba nti mbagamba for a long time the diocese of Busoga was under a white bishop. Why? Were there no Ugandans who could become bishops? Wili jazi yalemera ye Busoga. Abasoga bamukuba ate bakuba bamuwoze. Musoga munnabwe gwe bakuba. Naye nkugamba nti obviously there were Catholic bishops who could replace that man, that Muzungu. But it was the prerogative of the Pope to decide. In Cavalry, Bishop Herimana faced a rebellion from his flock. He was humiliated during a Christmas Mass when some worshippers stoned him, forcing him out of the church to save his dear life. This was unprecedented in the Catholic Church in Uganda, for a bishop to be subjected to such a humiliation. In the Anglican Church, Bishop Sebuhinjo, Cyprian Bamoze, and many others have been subjected to humiliating incidents, but the responsibility to sort out these problems was left entirely to the churches themselves.
Satama ekyogerako ngezaako kitegeera naye ebitongole mu ggwanga ebiriwo abantu babijjamu essuubi. Omukulembeze avaayo n'ayogera ku poliisi yakyogerako abantu be bazze batta n'alaga nti takyesiga gwe abeera n'oyogera ku Ministry of Lands n'oyogera ku poliisi ate bweyagala abantu bagende mu babyesige.
Anti kyenkubuulira
poliisi bweba yavaayo n'ettooma
anti church nayo Land Road n'ow'ekibuli Land Road naye yafuna square miles 24. They were bribed by the British. Nabo balina tenants. Kereziya egoba abantu mu ttaka. Wano egindi emawokota waliwo Bishop Matovu bali bamukubira mu church bayitayo Galatia. Cannot step there. Jesus ne bwamuyitayo. Nyai went to Galatia and talked to the people. Matovu tali nyewe bamukubanda bamutirayo.
Kale Mr. Tamenga tuvudda
nkogamba nti likewise as the government leaves the churches to solve their problems through their known structures, likewise the power to choose the NRM candidates rests with the NRM Delegates Conference and no other entity. Others can give advice, but not directives. Anybody who wants to influence the outcome of an NRM Delegates Conference must either be a delegate or a candidate. If we want to choose the Pope, you must enter the cardinal.
Government emale kulomba kyacholo zogere ate ku bantu ababulijjo.
Andi nkugambye nti abantu babulijjo, what has the church done?
Kwogera
government eziwa eddagala ery'obwereere ye waabwe tebaseera. There's guilty as nti mu kifo ky'okukwata okugamba abantu bakwateko anti mutya amasakalamento. Nakugamba anybody who says that the president should not come in 2016 is actually missing two important factors. Kuba babyogera. We are under a multi-party system which allows different choices. What this means is that you cannot have Museveni alone as a candidate. This will be a problem if we under a single party system. And a single party arrangement, single party in a country can select a candidate, and because no provision for independence or other candidates, this one goes to run opposed. Okay, baba ku principle. When you meander into politics, follow the principles. Toyinza kugamba nti faza agenza okusabira omusika mulumbe olubugo balugyewo. Don't go there. Olubugo is inseparable. Akabbo n'akambe n'ekibbo bibeerawo. Vatican to change it. Ensasi nga tezikubirwa mu church. Nti ensasi za mu lubaale. Until the Vatican to say it. This is just an instrument. It does not matter what kiri. Kakati bagamba wano malizo yogere byoyagala. Nembagamba nti the government of national interview bogera ku national government police brutality nabaga this argument also does not carry water like any other arguments advanced by the religious leaders is overlooks the following salient factors. Here is the police brutal in my opinion. Before anybody makes a conclusion, we have to understand that the acts of violence occur only when the Dr. Besigye enters the city. And he refuses to adhere to the rules.
Kati olo police ino kuba brutal wabayingide mu kibuga atugeze kyagulanyi
kisasa. Kati tia gas omulabamu.
Atali muna ina antera police emirimu gyaye gikoleta.
Anti tia gas omulabamu kati
tasobola kubeera mu
watali kapanga mese kapeta buketya.
Kati kitegeeza bwebanga bagumbula abantu balina okuba
bakugambye follow the rules. Kati ku escorting Kampala
is an excuse Mr.
Tamale. Onagana rules teach deception. Nti Besigye refuses to adhere to the rules. Nibamuga to escorting olagana jana nkumbi. Tukuyise bali wekibuga abantu bakole timpita wala. When is the police brutal too? Those who condemn the police brutality in inverted commas do not tell us what we should do to those who killed the policeman. Bakuba omuserikale jinja mutwe. Abaserikale bameka abafudde. Bonga temba condemning. Condemn the two. N'abasomo police bali religious leaders baba condemning. Yes. Como serikali na ino mwana. That's what I don't understand. Nine ente, nine embuzi, nine embizi, nina endiga. What I've seen, ebisolo bibiri tusinza amagezi, human beings. Endiga tesobola kugenda kutale ng'omwana wayo tagenze. No. Ente wakiri ogikama ogikamira ku ddiba ly'ennyana nga yafudde. Attached ku mwana waayo. Izonula embizi. Embizi bwezaala nga terina mmere eri obwana bwayo. Naye n'ogamba nti mu nsi mulimu omusajja akwata abawala n'abakubira amasimu n'abatwala n'abatta. And tomorrow it is okay. The death of Archbishop Lwanga would be a headline. But any serious newspaper would follow up with this story. Era kati biwedde kati omuvuka yamaze bagenda kumujjayo abayina ssente. Aba UN abo nga tebanaba kuyingira wano kukola ku bantu bano abatta abantu. They asked me, naye byoyogera mu gavumenti yamu mwebiwulira. Have you ever been called by the police? No. Yes. Right. UN had to come in to protect our lives.
Mr. Tamale.
Nti amawulire tegabiriimu. Omupakistani yajja wano. When the Pakistani went and sold his first consignment and he came back, who hosted him? It was a minister. He brought a champagne bottle n'agimuwa ne baginywa bonna ne sente n'amuwa. I was watching the Chinese last evening. A Chinese was meeting two younger men. They went for him to get him money, to kill these kids, to kill publicity. The Chinese tried to jam my system. I penetrated through his system. Yaba gobieti yaba descend. Nemukakanizi yaba was sent. Why? If I was like them, maybe can't I incite Ugandans against the Chinese? Amayumba gebayina entinda. And we see, we want investors. But if investors go the quantity agam, nti bogula we nyumba ye disease of fresh air, ne mosquitoes zijja kuyingira. These investors we want are accompanied by criminals. About food de Uganda, an abattoir, a human abattoir. Nakugamba, some religious leaders are also wanting, never to be no credibility, to enforce a person, to enforce discipline must be highly disciplined. Nebo boli faza mwenzi, ngovumirira obwenzi, omukazi kuyindako abaseka. Bw'oba oli musomesa, n'oyagala omwana gw'osomesa, the room saturates. Era nze mbagamba bulijjo ti abaana abawala bwe banga oyinamu omuwala gw'oyagala, bwe bazza omusango tobakuba. Bonna basonyiwe. Because the students will look the way you hold the stick when it comes to the
Satame nga tukyali ku nsonga y'abantu abakulembera amadiini. Ku Lwokuna twalaba nti Supreme Mufti Sheikh
Kamali kati nkugamba, in my yearly submission I pointed out that even where religious leaders lead political reforms, they should know when to leave. Tofuga bantu tutu olwanyisira aba South Africa, yes, abasaidi kati bafunye. I was brought up by my brother. Does he give me orders? Was the intention of educating me was to control me? You know the parting point. You must know when to leave. Number two, religious leaders are only respected if they are playing a neutral role and are not pursuing personal interest. Sabasajja Kabaka yagamba nti ekikutobudde kiributa ayina kye yayogera abavuka be nali mune bamwanukula ti omuliro gwoke oba yagamba koleza muliro bakiki abavuka be nali bamwange ne bagamba nti gwoke sanga lya mbogo. Why? Because you are meant to be neutral. The moment you are not neutral, then the other force also attack you. Father nakwata mu kalulu nakwata abantu nga bamulaba. There was a priest in Mawokota South. Father yatema gundi. Omusajja bamuyita mutuluzi yatona gundi yatona emmeeza n'agitona. Father yajjayo embazzi n'agitemera mu church. He does not want anything to do with NRM. That's why you were shouted down. Because you have deviated from your summons. Yeah, not a members, not the church. That's why I don't attend the church service. You attack me. Do you have a hotel for God? We fight there. You were doing Nzetata wange yansetula nantwala mu church ematale nayogera ne ba priests kujja kunyimisa amasakala meno namugamba these one are doing their work, I also doing my work. Ebyamasakala meno bibyabonawo
satameseza tewagenze
I walk it out.
Tokyagenda mu kanisa.
No, you must have a role. You cannot dictate on me.
Nyato omukristo yenno inogena
tusobola know your limits. Attacking a leader or government who does not threaten the church or religious interests cannot succeed. It ends up weakening the churches. People can decide their own interests. Not everybody who attends church service surrenders his head to a pastor or a religious leader. Many people go to worship God in the church, not for political lectures. I did political science at the university. How can you tell me about whom to vote? Nga gwe to political science degree.